Never read your book. You cannot be better than my daughter.
Oh, I can't believe this is happening. I just don't know what to do anymore.
Your father should never hear about how you're treated. If not when he's gone again, you will be punished.
You will know that I am not your mother today after Esther am done dealing with you. Please.
Housing mansion stood tall in my timer, Abuja. This mansion was very beautiful. It has white walls, high gates, the gardens were so beautiful, and long curtains that rarely opened. Inside that big house lived a small quiet girl called Emily Lawson. She was 6 years old, who had already learned how to cry without making a sound. Her mother, Mrs. Grace Lawson, had died 2 years earlier after a brief illness. Since then, the house had changed. It was no longer filled with laughter, no longer a home for Emily Lawson. Her father, Mr. Daniel Lawson, was a busy man, a logistic contractor whose business took him across many states in Nigeria, sometimes even London. He loved Emily deeply, but he was never around long enough to notice how lonely she had become. The nannies came and went. The cooks were changed severally. Even the gardeners were changed. But the silence stayed, and Emily always grew lonely. One December evening, Mr. Lawson returned from a long trip, but he did not come alone. He brought a woman with him. Her name was Margaret Coy. She was tall, beautiful, and she smiled too much. And behind her stood a girl that was older than Emily. Her name was Samantha Cole. "This is your new mom," Mr. Lawson said gently to Emily. Emily looked up at the woman, something in her chest tightened. She didn't understand why. Margaret bent down and was smiling. "Oh, my darling, come here," Margaret said, hugging Emily tightly, but the hug felt cold. That night, Emily cried quietly under her blanket. Something had entered the house and peace had left. The change did not start immediately. For the first few weeks, Margaret acted like the perfect wife and mother. She cooked, she laughed, she braided Emily's hair, she bought her biscuits and chocolates. When Mr. Lawson traveled again, the very morning his car left the compound, Margaret's face changed. She showed her real character. No smile. She was not pretending again. She told Emily, "From today, you will know your place in this house." Emily did not understand, but she would soon. Samantha had a big bedroom, toys, television, tablets, and she wore new clothes every week. Emily's room has no decoration. Her toys were packed away. She began to do house chores meant for house help. She washed plates, she swept the compound. She even washed Samantha's shoes. She woke up by 5 a.m. daily, but Samantha woke up at 8 a.m. At breakfast, Samantha would have bread, eggs, tea, but Emily only ate leftovers. If she complained, Margaret would slap her. "If you tell your father, I will make sure he hates you," Margaret would threaten Emily. Fear sealed Emily's lips. Both of the girls attended Cedar Heights Academy in Wuse too, but their lives were very different. Samantha struggled with her books. She barely passed, but Emily was exceptional. Her teachers adored her. She won quizzes, spelling bees, essay competitions. Principal Adeyemi once told her, "You are going to be great someday, my child." At home, Margaret hated hearing about Emily's success. "You think you are better than my daughter?" she would shout. She tore Emily's notebook. She hid her textbooks, but Emily studied at night with a small torchlight under her blanket. Education became her escape, her hope, her silent rebellion. Mrs. Amina Yusuf lived next door. The widow in her late 50s, she was soft-spoken, observant, and very kind. From her balcony, she could see part of the Lawson compound. One afternoon, she noticed Emily scrubbing the driveway floor with a brush almost bigger than her hands under the hot Abuja sun. She frowned. Why is that child doing house help work? Later that evening, she called Emily through the fence. "Come here, my dear." Emily hesitated. Margaret hated her talking to anyone, but something about Mrs. Amina's voice felt safe. "Are you okay?" Mrs. Amina asked. Emily nodded quickly, but her eyes said everything. Mrs. Amina began to watch more closely. One Saturday, Samantha failed a mathematics test. Margaret was so furious, but she did not shout at Samantha, her daughter. She called Emily. "This is your fault." She blamed everything on Emily. Emily was confused. "Mommy, I don't understand." Before she could finish, Margaret slapped her hard. "You always show off in school. You make my daughter look stupid." That day, Margaret beat Emily with a belt until she could barely stand. Samantha watched silently without pity. That night, Emily cried into her pillow, but she made no sound. She had learned that pain must be quiet. Unexpectedly, Mr. Lawson returned from Port Harcourt without informing anyone. Margaret panicked. She quickly changed Emily's clothes, brushed her face and her hair, and forced a smile onto her face. "Remember," she whispered, holding Emily's chin, "if you say anything, you will regret it." When Mr. Lawson saw Emily, he smiled warmly. "My princess, you look happy." Emily just forced a smile. Margaret stood behind her, acting like the perfect mother. "She's been wonderful, Danielle, so helpful and obedient." Mr. Lawson was proud. He had no idea that his daughter was being maltreated. Mrs. Amina watched from her balcony. Anger was rising in her chest. At the end of the term, Emily came first in her class. Samantha came 22nd. Margaret's anger that day was terrifying. She locked Emily inside the storeroom for hours without food. "You will stop being better than my daughter," she screamed from outside. In the dark, Emily whispered to herself, "One day I will leave this house." That promise became her lifeline. One afternoon, a letter from school came to the mansion. Emily had been selected for a National Academic Scholarship competition in Nigeria. Principal Adeyemi had recommended her personally. Margaret opened the letter. Her face darkened. She tore it into pieces and threw it into the bin. But Mrs. Amina, watching from the fence, saw everything. Later that evening, she called Emily and quietly handed her the paper. "Hide this. This is your way out." For the first time in years, Emily felt something she had almost forgotten. That was hope. That night, after everyone slept, Emily spread the scholarship letter on her bed and read it. Her hands trembled, but her mind was steady. The competition was in 3 weeks at the Abuja National Civil Center. She had to pass 3 stages: the written exams, the interviews, and a presentation. She had no textbooks. Margaret had hidden most of them, so she began borrowing old notes from classmates quietly. She studied during lunch breaks. She read in the library until closing time. At night, she revised with a torchlight under her blanket, while mosquitoes hummed in the darkness. Sleep became a luxury to her, but she was more interested in achieving her dreams. Mrs. Amina could no longer pretend she didn't see. One evening, she invited Emily over at the excuse of giving her snacks. Inside, she brought out old textbooks that belonged to her late son. "Use this," she said gently. "You are not alone, my child." Emily's eyes was filled with tears. She had trained herself not to shed a tear. Miss Amina also did something else. She called Principal Adeyemi privately and told him everything she had been observing for years. The principal was shocked. He had always admired Emily's brilliance, but never imagined her life at home. Margaret noticed Emily reading more than usual. Her suspicion grew. One afternoon, she followed Emily secretly and saw her enter Mrs. Amina's house. She was very angry. That night, she went into Emily's room and found the reconstructed scholarship letter. She screamed, "So you think you will escape me?" She beat Emily mercilessly and locked her in the bedroom. But something had changed. Emily did not cry. She did not beg. She said only one thing quietly: "You cannot stop my future." Margaret felt fear for the first time. 2 days later, Principal Adeyemi came to the Lawson house unannounced. Margaret panicked, but welcomed him with fake politeness. "I came to discuss Emily's participation in the national competition," he said firmly. Margaret forced a smile. "Oh yes, she told me, but the principal's eyes were sharp. I will be picking her up myself that day." Margaret's heart dropped. She realized control was slipping from her hands. Very early that morning, before Margaret could create an excuse, Principal Adeyemi arrived. Emily stepped into his car. Her heart was pounding. As they drove through the streets of Abuja, past Wuse Market, past Area 11, toward the Civic Center, Emily stared out the window. For the first time in years, she felt free air. At the competition hall, students from the best schools in Abuja gathered. Emily was calm, focused, and brilliant. She passed the written test. She impressed the panel during the interview. Her presentation received a standing ovation. By evening, the results were announced. First place, Emily Lawson. Cedar Heights Academy. The applause thundered. People clapped for her. Emily stood frozen. She had done it. And somewhere in my timer, Margaret felt the beginning of her defeat. That evening, Principal Adeyemi did not drop Emily at the gate and leave as usual. He asked her urgently, "Is there anything you want to tell me about your home?" Emily hesitated. Years of fear held her back. But then she remembered the storeroom, the beatings, the hunger, the torn books, and she spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Every word was heavy with truth. Principal Adeyemi listened in silence and was confused. He did not take her home immediately. Instead, he drove to Mrs. Amina's house, and for the first time, Emily slept in a house where no one shouted at her. That night, the principal placed a call to Mr. Daniel Lawson, who was in Accra. "Sir, you need to return to Abuja immediately. It concerns your daughter." Mr. Lawson arrived Abuja the next afternoon, confused and worried. He went straight to Cedar Heights Academy, where Principal Adeyemi and Mrs. Amina were waiting. They told him everything. At first, he refused to believe it. He said, "Margaret would never do such." But then, Mrs. Amina spoke calmly. "I have watched it for years." The principal showed him Emily's bruises on his phone, her thin frame, her trembling hands. Mr. Lawson's words shattered. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "What have I done?" He realized he had not been absent, not just physically, but as a father. They drove together to the Maitama house. Margaret was seated comfortably in the living room when Mr. Lawson walked in. She smiled. "Daniel, you didn't tell me you were." Her words died when she saw his face. He was not smiling. "Where is Emily?" he asked. Margaret started stammering. She's at school. "She has not been here for 2 days," he said quietly. Fear gripped her. Then he spoke words she never expected. "I know everything." Samantha stood frozen at the staircase, watching everything. Margaret tried to deny it. She started crying. She started to act, but the evidence was too much. The lies could no longer stand. That evening, Mr. Lawson made a decision without shouting, without drama, with cold finality. "You and your daughter will leave this house today. You will take nothing that belongs to me." Margaret begged, she cried, she knelt, but Mr. Lawson did not agree. Security escorted them out of the compound with only their clothes and a small bag. The same gate Margaret had controlled for years closed behind her. This time, she was outside and powerless. A week later, the house in Maitama changed. The curtains were drawn up. A breath of fresh air. Sunlight filled the rooms again. Emily returned home, not as a frightened girl, but as a girl with quiet strength in her eyes. Her father hugged her for a long time. "I am sorry," he kept saying. Emily did not cry. She simply said, "I'm okay, Daddy." She resumed school. She continued excelling. The scholarship opened doors to greater opportunities. Years later, Emily became one of the youngest education reform advocates in Nigeria, speaking for children who suffer silently in their own homes. And whenever she stood before the crowds, she remembered the little girl who studied with a torchlight under a blanket, the little girl who endured, the little girl who never gave up. In the Lawson house, the curtains no longer stay closed because the truth had come in with the light. We have come to the end of this story. Kindly like, share for others to watch, comment your thoughts about the story, and subscribe for more stories. Thank you. See you in my next story.